Good morning, Ram Nation. We are back with another edition of DNVR Rams Live. As always, I'm your host, Justin Michael. The summer of Justin is upon us, guys. NCAA 25 is back. The general release is out now, so it's not just those that paid more for the early access. I was too cheap to buy the deluxe edition. I did EA Play or whatever for $5, where you got the 10-hour trial. It was a lot of fun. I cannot wait to not have to worry about those time restraints. I'm going to give out the top 10 CSU players on NCAA 25. I know a lot of you probably know by now, but it's fun to talk about nonetheless. Also going to get into the top 10 non-conference matchups for the Mountain West. The Mountain West plays more Power 4 teams than any other of the group of 5 leagues. Unsurprising. Trying to swing up a little bit. You need the money, but also trying to kind of prove you can hang and make a strong case for that college football playoff committee. Obviously, with the expanded playoff, a nice opportunity for the Mountain West to potentially get back in that mix for the first time in a decade. Haven't had a really a significant bowl since like 2014 when Boise State went to the Fiesta Bowl. I'm going to give out my first power rankings of the fall. It's way too early, but my opinion on a couple of teams have shifted a little bit now that we have had some transfers. Now that we've had some late coaching changes, extremely late coaching changes. We've obviously talked a lot about how that could potentially benefit CSU with a quirky schedule, 8 first-year coaches. If you missed that, go back and check it out yesterday. It's been a good week. Got my first ever grill. We got it built thanks to the girlfriend. She was Rosie the Riveter on that one. But we were able to grill last night. The vibes were right. The video game's back. Kind of feels like it's the summer of 2004 for me again, except I'm almost 30 now, which feels a little bit weird. I do want to shout out Nick Reese. He had a super chat late in the show yesterday. It didn't come through until I had already ended the stream. Of course, I felt really bad about that. A big shout out to him. It was regarding NCAA 25. A lot of people have kind of pushed for me to stream. I'll figure out how to do it. It seems like there's enough demand that I'll figure out how to do some stuff on Twitch and we can interact and have a little bit of fun. I know behind the scenes, I'm going to do a league with my brother and some of his buddies. We're all going to do Mountain West team, so I'm looking forward to that. If you missed it, Utah State officially has terminated Blake Anderson. Crazy situation there. We'll kind of see what happens, but based on everything I've read, and I don't want to speak ignorantly, it seems like he's going to lose his lawsuit. I guess we'll kind of have to see what happens there, but schools don't really fire for cause unless they're pretty sure. Like so many times they're willing to eat the million, the 1.5 just to avoid the possibility of going to court and arbitration and all that. The fact that they were willing to do that for a coach who frankly was successful. It's not like they were looking for an excuse to run him out of town. That speaks volumes to me. We're going to get into the Mountain West Power Rankings, top 10 non-conference matchups here in a second. The top 10 CSU players on NCAA 25, though, I wanted to go through that. I should have included it in my article the way that Kevin Lytle did and the everything need to know about NCAA 25. But let's get into it here. CSU, they've got 7 players that are rated 80 or above. All the top 10 are 77 or above. We got linebacker Chase Wilson coming in at 77 overall. He and Dom Jones, number 10, number 9. Dom Jones corner, also a 77 overall. Newer Gatkuth came in at a 78, which was maybe a little bit lower than I was expecting. I was kind of thinking low 80s. Nickel Aiden Hector comes in at 80, maybe a little bit higher than I would have anticipated. But I think, like I mentioned yesterday, he kind of gets the benefit of the doubt after being dinged up all of last year. If it was based on 2022, I think that 80 ranking would be just about right. Henry Blackburn comes in at 82. Some love for the secondary. He and Jack Howell both come in 82 or above. Both Jacob Gardner and Drew Moss at 85. You can run the ball behind that right side of the O-line. I've had some success there. Jack Howell, the second highest rated player on the game for CSU at 86. And then, of course, Torrey Horton, 91 overall, an absolute cheat code. I've gone crazy with him the first couple of games. It's fun. And I'm not using this comparison lightly, but it reminds me of using Randy Moss like on Madden 2005 with the Vikes back in the day. That rare combination of speed, he's a vertical threat, catches everything, an absurd catch radius, got a great vertical, dangerous in the open field. Like he's he's so nasty, and it's just cool to see him get the respect that he deserves on a national level. That's good for the program. I asked Norvell about it, and he essentially was like, if we're going to be the type of program that we aim to be, we need players that have, that type of national respect that are, considered top NFL prospects, considered, top in their individual position groups. And for Torrey to get that type of recognition, it's really cool, especially when you look at the other guys. He's the only G5 receiver that's getting that type of respect. Shout out to everybody in the Toyota chat and rocking with us this morning. Got my homie Kyle Griffin. We used to work for CSU back in the day. Great to see you, buddy. He says he's taking CSU to the Natty as soon as he remembers how to play. I'll be honest, bud, it's a humbling experience. These kids online, they know what they're doing, and it's hard to play defense, man. I feel like I've missed so many easy open field tackles, and I've kind of seen a lot of people have similar complaints. It is fun to light it up, though, offensively. Good morning, Joey, in the Toyota chat. Appreciate you and the support as well. Kyle with the Tulo comment. That's what Jim McElwain used to call me back in the day. Hey, I don't think he ever actually learned my real name, but the fact that he knew me enough to have a nickname that stuck, that meant a lot to me. And I've talked about it before, but Mac was always really good to me. He didn't need to give me the time of the day because I did not matter enough on that staff for him to do so. That said, he took a lot of time actually to talk about life, the game with me. I mean, I had a lot of fun working on that staff, a lot of memories I look back on fondly. We're going to get into those top 10 non-conference games for the Mountain West. Real quick, though, I do want to shout out the homies at Lucy. 100% pure nicotine, always tobacco-free. Lucy isn't like every other nicotine pouch company that's owned by Big Tobacco. They're kind of like the mom and pop shop of pouches. They've got 2 milligram, 4 milligram, 6 milligram, whatever you're into. Personally, big apple ice guy. Mango is awesome, but you can't go wrong with just like a classic mint or this one's espresso. Level up your nicotine routine with Lucy. Go to lucy.co/Rams. Use that promo code Rams. Get 20% off your first order. Lucy offers free shipping and has a 30-day refund policy if you change your mind. Lucy.co. Use that code Rams to get 20% off. And again, always free shipping. Here comes the fine print. Lucy products only for adults of legal age, and every order is age verified. Warning, this product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical. I also got to talk to you guys about Toyota. Toyota, a proud partner of CSU Athletics and the official vehicle of DNVR. Trucks have been a part of Toyota's DNA for generations. They've built durable legends destined for greatness that are perfect for Colorado. Whether you're conquering those off-road trails or you're hauling the weight of the world, then there's a truck that's right for you. You can try the Tacoma. They got the Land Cruiser back in action. They offer 17 models with available all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, like the Epic 4Runner. They also offer more low and zero emission vehicles combined than any other automaker to give customers numerous choices to reduce their carbon footprint. 16 different hybrid vehicles to choose from, like the Tundra iForce Max hybrid truck. Not to be outdone, Toyota SUVs take command on the road and on the trails, so you can explore the road less traveled without sacrificing smooth city rides in the SUVs like the RAV4, and the Grav Highlander. Toyota, proud partner of CSU Athletics and the official vehicle. DNVR got a little bit tongue-tied there. David Adams in the Toyota chat wants to know, Xbox Series S worth getting for this game? I did it, man. I was a little bit frustrated because my Xbox One still worked perfectly. I don't game enough to really justify the system upgrade, but you can go with a refurbished one. It's a couple $100. It's not the end of the world. If you want to play the game, it really is worth it. It lives up to the hype. It's not perfect. Like, there are some things they're going to have to tweak. There's some updates they're going to make. There's some things I wish they included on CSU's side, like Cam the Ram. I would have liked to get a visual of Comatose, but there's also a lot of really incredible details that they nailed. The train whistle and the menacing music on third down, the visuals of campus at the north end zone. It's a lot of fun, man. And I'm really looking forward to it, especially when they update it and put all those alternate uniforms in, rocking state pride, rocking Ag Day. Like, if you're like me and you've been waiting a decade plus for the game, I do think it is worth it. Joey B, Justin, nice grill too. I appreciate you, man. I'm underqualified to be rocking that machinery. But we started with hot dogs. I gotta walk before I run. I know my role when it comes to grilling, and even like burgers seems a little ambitious, let alone like steaks or something like that. Let's get into the top 10 non-con matchups for the Mountain West in 2024. As I said at the beginning, the Mountain West will play more games against P4 competition than any other G5 league in the country. Makes a lot of sense. They always swing up. You see that on the basketball side as well. At number 10, and I guess I should add before I get into the list, I did not include the Oregon State and Washington State matchups because every team in the Mountain West plays at least one of them. A couple of teams play both of them. I did not include the Service Academy matchups either because we have them every year. They're typically not in September, and I was focusing more on the early slate, although there are some big random non-conference games in November for some of the West Coast teams this year. There's just some really wonky schedules with how the Mountain West is doing the scheduling agreement with the Pac-12 or Pac-2, whatever the hell you want to call them these days. Fresno State, for instance, San Jose State will both be playing a non-conference game in week 13 or whatever the last week of the season. It's a weird spot. There were some games that I left out that I think you could make a strong argument for. UNLV hosts Syracuse, that Fresno State game at UCLA. San Jose State plays at Stanford that same day. Utah State goes to USC, all really good matchups. A couple more. Nevada hosts SMU, San Diego State at CMU, Central Michigan. Speaking of Jim McElwain, that one's kind of fun. Also, kind of some fun storylines there because Moretti, the linebacker that started at CMU, is now a starter for San Diego State. So you have kind of that storyline. New Mexico goes to Auburn. They've had some trouble with some Mountain West schools over the years, and Hawaii hosts UCLA. Those are all kind of the honorable mentions I would throw out. But there are some really big time matchups for the Mountain West. Obviously, CSU's in a couple of them, but I'm going to throw out a couple of these other ones just so you have an idea of what the high profile games are, what you should keep an eye out come September. Starting with number 10, and maybe it would have been better to just go like week by week and say like these are the best Mountain West games of week 1. These are the best Mountain games of week 2. I decided to do a list. It's the off season, a lot of lists in the off season. Air Force at Baylor, though, that's number 10 for me. That's week 3. Rematch of the 2022 Armed Forces Bowl. Air Force won that game handily. It was a cold night. They ran the ball well. Hazik Daniels had a solid game, 30-15 win for the Falcons. Air Force should be 2-0. They've got, it's like Merrimack, and then they host San Jose State to start the year. But this is going to be like where we find out, is this Air Force team for real? They only returned 6 starters, and we'll talk about this in the power rankings. I'm kind of inclined to fade them this year, although every instinct in me is to not do that because I have so much respect for that program under Troy Calhoun. It just kind of feels like they deserve the benefit of the doubt, much like a Boise State at this point. We'll get into that when we get into the power rankings. That game, 5:30 p.m. Mountain Time on FS1. A nice little national window for Air Force. That'll be a fun game. Number 9, we're going CSU at Texas. Week 1, 1:30 on ESPN. All these times will be Mountain Time. Rams 36.5 point underdogs, so that's why it's lower on the list. Not expected to be much of a game. Over under set at 59. That said, I like CSU to cover. I also like the Rams to hang around a little bit. I do think Texas's speed, their size in the trenches, and also just that heat. It's going to be rough, but I do think it's an opportunity to gain some confidence. I remember back to when CSU went to Tuscaloosa in 2013, 2017 as well, and both those games were largely competitive. I think if you can go out and you can make some plays, you can move the ball a little bit, as long as you don't like give up 80 or something like that, you're just kind of hoping to be competitive and obviously stay healthy because you've got some big in-state matchups coming up as well. Joey B wants to know, Justin, will you be in Austin for the game? I'm not 100% sure yet, honestly, what my travel schedule is going to be. I don't anticipate it, to be honest, just because it's a game where they don't have like a ton of chances. I do think if CSU were to be competitive in the league play, I look at some of those games like Nevada, Fresno State potentially as an opportunity to travel. Air Force obviously be in the Springs for that one, but we shall see. I would really like to go because it's kind of a bucket list game for me. I've always wanted to see a game in Texas. Austin in August. I don't know if that'd be my dream time to be out there. But if I am, I'll certainly keep everybody in the loop. We'll have a ton of content revolving around that game either way. I'm going to have, I think, live post-game shows like last year, and we're going to have a lot more live shows this fall as a whole. So we'll have a ton of coverage regardless of what happens. But big opportunity for CSU against Texas. would be a little bit higher, but there's some big time games for the Mountain West in week 1, and I think there's some more winnable matchups, and I did want to factor that in as well. Fresno State goes to Michigan week 1. That's a 5:30 p.m. start on NBC, so really great exposure window for the Bulldogs in their first game under my guy, Tim Skipper. Fresno only 20.5 point underdogs. Probably some uncertainty with Michigan factors into that as well. Obviously, they lose Harbaugh. They lose, JJ McCarthy, the heart of that team, but that's still a really deep team. I expect them to be a playoff contender. Over under set at 47.5. Can the Bulldogs hang? Like, to me, that's a big statement opportunity. That's a really veteran roster. You got Mikey Keene, you got Malik Sherrod in the backfield. In theory, I do think that this Fresno State team should still be very, very competitive. I also think that the loss of Tedford is significant enough to factor into like who I view as true contenders at this point. And well, I've got nothing but love for Tim Skipper. If I could see, if they went on and won the league, it would make me very happy for him. I think that the loss of Tedford is pretty significant because he's one of the best, like most underappreciated coaches in all the country, a quarterback guru through and through. And those teams were always competitive. Just look at what Fresno State was before he came in. It was a mess. Number 7, Wyoming at Arizona State in week 1. Look, ASU is picked last, I think, in the Big 12 or near the bottom. That's an 8:30 p.m. start on FS1. A little bit later, which is nice for Wyoming. Tempe and August is rough. But Wyoming 7-point dogs. You can get them at like plus 200 on the money line. I like Wyoming to win this game outright. Like, I think Dillingham will turn it around at Arizona State. But Wyoming's defense is stacked. They're going to run the ball. They got a great O-line. We'll get into all that in the power rankings. It feels like a very winnable game. And I can tell you that the expectation from a lot of Wyoming supporters is to go and win that game. Like, I think if they don't win it, it'll be viewed somewhat as a disappointment, even though, you lose Craig Bull, which is huge. You got a new starting quarterback. I can't pronounce his name. Svoboda. Good Lord, that's a tongue twister. I'm going to get mocked for that one, I'm sure. He was great in the bowl game. Got a big arm, accurate. We'll see what happens there. Number 6, we got UNLV at Houston. That's also week 1. Another winnable game, another statement game. UNLV was awesome last year. They're the shocking team that goes to the conference championship. Defensively, they were really stout under Barry Odom. That offense was a lot more electric than I anticipated, but you lose Jordan Maeva. They do bring in Sluka, who's the Holy Cross transfer, put up huge numbers at the FCS level. That said, like, I'm still kind of in wait and see mode with UNLV. I did give them a lot of respect in my power rankings, but to me, that's a big statement game. It's a winnable game. Houston, much like Arizona State, not exactly supposed to be a powerhouse in the Big 12. The last I saw in that, UNLV 3-point underdogs. So getting some respect from Vegas. Number 5, Utah at Utah State. There are so many in-state matchups in week 3. Utah State, Oregon State, Washington State, and of course CSU. But number 5, we're going Utah State. This would be higher on the list if they didn't have the whole situation with Blake Anderson. Probably an opportunity for Utah State at home to kind of prove, hey, we're still in the mix. That still is a pretty talented roster through and through. But there are a couple other games that intrigue me just a little bit more. That's 2:30 start on CBS Sports Network. Number 4, UNLV goes to Kansas in week 3, 5 p.m. Mountain Time on ESPN. There could be 100 points scored in that game. That should be electric offensively. And again, another opportunity for UNLV to kind of prove we're for real. I mean, there's a world in which UNLV gets hot this year and they play their way into the playoff. They've got 3 P4 games, but all of them are relatively winnable. Houston, Kansas, and Syracuse. There's also a world in which they just lose all 3 of those games. And even if they went like 7-5, it would feel kind of like a disappointment after this past year, especially after hanging on to Barry Odom. So I'm really interested to see what happens with the Rebels this year. They've got a lot to like, but I also think there's some healthy skepticism given the last 20 years. Number 3, BYU at Wyoming, week 3, 7 p.m. Mountain Time on CBS Sports Network. This game's going to get overshadowed nationally. Like, you're going to hear a lot more about Oregon State. Obviously, the Rocky Mountain Showdown, you're going to hear a ton about that. Even Utah State, I think on a national level is going to get a lot more run. This game, has as much hatred between the two fan bases as any rivalry. I mean, Wyoming and BYU hate each other like CSU and CU. Like it's up there, or like CSU and Wyoming. I again, like, this game's gonna get upstaged, but it's an awesome whack rivalry reignited, and I'm excited that CSU's got the home and home with BYU coming up over these next couple of years. Those were some of my favorite games. BYU kind of beat up on CSU in the early 2000s, but even in some of those games they lost, obviously the 08 game with guard Charles Johnson and Joey Porter chest bumping each other in the end zone is the one that everybody loved to think about. But there were a lot of great games between those schools over the years. Number 2, Boise State at Oregon, week 2, 9 p.m. Mountain Time on Peacock. Boise plays like the whole Pacific Northwest this year. They got Oregon, Oregon State, Washington State, and Portland State on the schedule. So they're doing the PNW regional tour this year. Look, Oregon, I think, is going to be a sleeper pick for the national title. This is a game I feel like if you just hang as Boise, you feel pretty good about yourself. If you're able to win it, though, then all of a sudden Boise launches themselves into that, playoff conversation, and that's certainly going to be their hope this year. They're the preseason favorite in the league for the 14th straight year. We'll see. I'm really excited for that game. I'm actually glad it's a little bit later so that I can, do all my work and then still have time to watch it late at night. Peacock, kind of a bummer because I know not everybody has it. I do, but I am looking forward to that. And if there was ever any doubt, I mean, you're listening to the wrong show, but the biggest game of the non-conference slate, obviously, the Rocky Mountain Showdown, CSU versus CU, or I think you say the road team first in America, whatever. 5:30 on CBS, 7.5 point underdogs at the moment. The Rams are getting a lot more respect than they did last year when it was like 27 or whatever the hell that absurd spread was. I can't wait for this one. I think it's going to be a circus. I think there's going to be a lot of unnecessary drama depending on kind of how the coaches conduct themselves. They don't like each other, and I think it's fun. I think it's good for the rivalry, but I am already like pre-annoyed about the national media that are going to pop into the mix. I mean, all these even local people that don't typically cover college football, and now all of a sudden, oh, we're here for the big game. Hope their seats in press row or somewhere near the back, because there's a lot of us that have been talking college football for years and years. And for me, obviously, this is kind of a dream come true. I've never gotten to go to a Rocky Mountain Showdown in Fort Collins. Last time it happened, 96, I was 1 year old. We were supposed to have it in 2020. COVID didn't allow that to happen. That COVID schedule in general was really disrupted. In hindsight, probably a blessing. Like, the last thing we needed was a Steve Adazio coach team to just get absolutely murdered for the first RMS in FOCO in close to 30 years. But I can't wait. That CBS window is huge. I've been asked this quite a bit. I don't anticipate that game day will come. I imagine they'll put a little bit more emphasis on Nebraska. I think they'll be in Lincoln for that one. We'll see. I mean, if CSU were to be really competitive against Texas or win, I mean, obviously crazier things have happened, then without a doubt they would be there. But that's kind of my gut feeling for a likely 1-1 CSU team versus, we'll see what happens with CU. They got a tough schedule. I mean, North Dakota State is no slouch, and then going to Lincoln is tough. I'm interested to see what happens with all of that. We're going to get into our way too early Mountain West power rankings. I do want to shout out the homies at Shady Rays. Sunglasses feels fitting talking about them after talking about the showdown. But get ready with the season ahead with quality shades that are built to last. Our friends at Shady Rays have you covered. They've got some premium polarized shades that won't break the bank, rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. Infinite styles to choose from. And what's awesome about Shady Rays is you can have peace of mind when you wear them. Every single pair is backed by lost and broken replacements. If you lose them, if you break them, if your dog eats them, if you step on them, whatever, they're going to replace them. You're good. You can also just return them for free if you're not feeling them within 30 days. Exclusively for our listeners, Shady Rays giving out the best deal of the season. Head to shadyrays.com. Use that code DNVR for 35% off polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself the shades rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. By the way, if you do use that code DNVR, take a picture in your shades. Tag me on Twitter at Justin T. Michael at DNVR_Rams. Always love to see the community supporting our partners. Best way to support us by supporting our partners. I also want to shout out Coors Light, baby. It's awesome to have Coors Light as a sponsor. Coors Light encourages you to choose a chill mindset. I've had a heck of a week. I've talked about it a lot. It's been chaotic, moving and car troubles and all kinds of stuff. Feels like we're turning a corner. Last night was epic. Grilling in that Fort Collins air doesn't get much better than that. But when life gets chaotic, when it gets stressful, it's important to make sure you don't lose sight of what really matters. You got to make sure you keep your cool, put yourself in that chill mindset, and then once you got your vibes right, crack open an ice cold Coors Light. When those mountains turn blue, it's as cold as the Rockies. When you embrace a chill mindset, it's a good time to choose chill. Crack open a Coors Light, crisp and refreshing as the Colorado Rockies make the most out of the times you choose to chill with Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door with Instacart by going to CoorsLight.com/DNVR. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. All right. Shout out to everybody in the Toyota chat rocking with us. Shout out to everybody listening on the audio only side down the line. Always appreciate you guys rocking with us. We're so close to football season. It's a little bit dead right now. We have not had a ton of recruiting news. There's only so much NBA Summer League that we can focus on. Certainly milked this NCAA 2025 game for what it's worth in this first week. And I'll be honest, you'll probably get some more content out of that, just given that there's not a whole lot going on at the moment, but we are close. I'm going to start getting into position previews and all that. So don't worry. The good stuff is right around the corner. I do want to get into our power rankings, which are a little bit different than if I would have done them a couple of weeks ago. Obviously, we voted for the preseason projected order of finish, and a couple of these are slightly different than how I had them a couple of weeks back. Utah State, obviously Fresno State, their situations have changed drastically. That could be, not necessarily, but it could be, the difference between finishing one or two spots higher or lower. Starting at the bottom, we have Nevada at number 12. They're on their third coach in the last 4 years. They play a brutal schedule too, guys. Like, there's not a lot to feel good about if you're a Nevada fan going into the year. I mean, Brendan Lewis is tough. He played really hard in that game against CSU, and Nevada, you could tell they wanted that one. But I mean, they open against SMU at home at least, but then they go to Troy, which is wonky travel-wise. Georgia Southern at home, then to Minnesota, Eastern Washington, and their league schedule is really hard. They open at San Jose State, Oregon State, Fresno State, at Hawaii, CSU, at Boise State, Air Force, at UNLV. Easily the hardest schedule of any of the Mountain West teams. I think they've made some good moves this offseason. I do think Jeff Choate was a good hire, and obviously I'm rooting for Lubick to have success on that staff. The fact that he's even coaching again is incredible. But it's tough to feel good about much with this Nevada roster. It's a total overhaul. And when you have 3 coaches in 4 years, it's just hard to have any type of stability. Number 11, New Mexico. They're going to have 5 starting transfers for the offensive line, and that terrifies me. The only reason I really had them higher than Nevada is that they've got a couple of guys that I would argue could be considered like fringe all-conference players. Tavion Combs, when healthy in the secondary, is a stud. Aaron Rodriguez, their punter, which I know you're not really bragging about punters, but he's solid. Devin Dampier, under center, at least got a little bit of experience last year, showed some things athletically. It's a tough spot. I had been open about how I was rooting for the Lobos under Danny Gonzalez. I thought if anybody could have success there, it would be him, especially with Rocky Long at DC initially. You bring in an alum, you bring in somebody who was there at the peak of their program, in the WAC in the early 2000s, late 90s. Like, those CSU New Mexico games were intense. And honestly, that's kind of what won me over, was talking about some of the history with him. And he had mentioned just how, obviously with CSU not losing to New Mexico since 2009, that hadn't really been competitive of late. And that was a bar of which they were kind of trying to measure themselves, was, can we get that CSU game to matter again? We never really got that opportunity. Obviously a big one for the Rams, trying to extend that win streak once again at home this year. It's tough to feel good about Nevada or New Mexico. I think both those teams, any more than 3 wins would be shocking to me. Number 10, we got San Jose State. One of the harder teams to forecast. Like, if I was dead wrong on San Jose State and they finish, top 5 or something like that, it wouldn't be shocking to me. You do lose Chevin Cordero under center. Kyrie Robinson, the running back, is gone as well. They bring in Emmett Brown, Washington State transfer at QB. Nick Nash, great athlete at wide receiver, converted QB. Dude's been there for like 10 years. They got Justin Lockhart as well, former Norvell receiver at Nevada. A couple of those guys ended up at San Jose State that didn't end up in CSU with Torrey and all of them. I don't really know what to expect. Ken Numa Tololo. God, I'm struggling with pronunciations this morning. He had some success, obviously, over the years at Navy, but it felt like a really weird fit. It feels a lot like CSU going with Adazio to me, like a guy that just has no regional ties, doesn't have any experience with a style that is going to translate within this league. They do have some talent in the defensive front seven. Maybe that experience combined with a strong running game is enough to allow them to be competitive, but they've got a pretty tough schedule as well. And starting with Sacramento State, that's never a slouch. Then September 7th at Air Force, they go to Washington State. They've got Fresno State on the road, Oregon State on the road, Boise State, and UNLV. They do get those games at home at least. You get Boise State, UNLV, and Stanford all at home to close the year. But you very realistically probably are closing the year with 3 home losses. So if they don't have success right off the bat, it's just going to be a tough spot for them. Number 9, and they're significantly lower than what I had them just 2 weeks ago. Probably would have been more like 6. I've got Utah State. It looks like they're going to hang on to Ike Larson for now and Jalen Royals. With this coaching change happening so late in the cycle, they weren't really at risk of having a mass exodus because most rosters around the country are full. There's always some wiggle room, especially for stars. But I would keep an eye out on this team if things go south early on. I mean, I'm not trying to be that guy, but we experienced it in year 1 under Norvell. Just because players stick around initially doesn't mean they're actually going to stick around. You lose your first couple of games. Players might decide, you want to know what? I would like to hang on to my eligibility for this year. Then they quit the team after like 2-3 games. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just saying I keep an eye on it because it feels like Utah State is in a very weird spot. They brought in multiple transfer quarterbacks. It looks like it's going to be Spencer Petras, the Iowa transfer that starts. They also brought over CJ Tiller from Boise, Utah transfer, Bryson Barnes. It's kind of the island of misfit toys. Like, I don't think I would take any of those quarterbacks over what they had even last year. But we'll see. Jalen Royals is a stud, potential All-American candidate at wide receiver, explosive guy, really big threat vertically, great hands. We'll see there. San Diego State, another team that's hard to forecast, up there with Nevada for the worst schedule in the Mountain West this year. Very little experience. I think they're going to be a lot more fun. Like, I think it's going to be kind of like a air raid, Air Coryell type offense or whatever with Sean Lewis. I'm interested to see how AJ Duffy looks after coming over from Florida State. Obviously, Lewis Brown, former Ram. I want to see what he does as wide receiver 1. I think they're going to score some points. I don't think they're going to be as stout defensively as we've become accustomed to seeing over the years. And I don't know if they're going to be able to run the ball with the same type of consistency. It wouldn't surprise me if they're just like a really fun team to watch, maybe like a Hawaii with Timmy Chang these last couple of years, but ultimately only win 3, 4, or 5 games, something like that. And then maybe you're able to kind of build off of it in year 2. Seems like they're recruiting pretty well as a whole. Number 7, we've got Hawaii. 3 of their 4 non-conference games are at home, but they do play 8 straight weeks to close the year. Hanging on to Braden Shager under quarterback, that was huge. He, BFN, and Mikey Keene were kind of the 3 candidates for all conference recognition here in the preseason. And McBride and Tynes at wide receiver, who they moved over from running back. That's a nice little core. Like, if you were ranking around the leagues, the best quarterback to receiver combos, I mean, I would put Torrey Horton and Armani Winfield or Donovan Ollie, whoever you want to throw out there at the top with BFN. That would probably be number 2 for me. I mean, Boise State, if we're including all of the skill positions, Boise with GNT, they make it a little bit interesting. I'm not crazy about Boise's receiving core, though. I think Hawaii is up there with Wyoming and with CSU for like the 3 teams most likely to exceed their preseason expectations. I thought their win total was too low. They won 3 out of 4 to close the year, obviously beat CSU and prevented them from making a bowl. Chang has 5 upsets in the last 2 years. Like, they punch up. Kind of feels like with their QB back. If Shager left, I'd feel much differently. But behind an O-line that returns 3 starters, got some speed out wide, it feels like they're kind of due to break through and make a bowl. And I like that they've got 3 of 4 non-conference games at home. Start and get a little bit of positive momentum rolling. You know, the Island, still one of the better home field advantages in all of college football. I know it's not as intense of an atmosphere as it used to be, but just the travel factor alone is wonky. This is where things get interesting. At number 6, and God, I might look back at this in December and just kill my take for this. You know, like I have Air Force at 6. They only returned 6 starters. I just feel like at some point it's got to catch up to Calhoun. His ability to reload these past couple years has been incredible. They do have fullback Dylan Carson back, who finished the year strong. I think he had 3 straight 100-yard rushing performances, and obviously that fullback dive is such a big staple of the offense. But I don't know. I feel like at some point it's got to catch up to them. They are 40-12 over the last 4 seasons. They avoid Boise and UNLV in league play, so a lot to like about that, and the fact that, you know, shoot, if you believe that CSU and their staff continuity should be a strength, I mean, Troy Calhoun, by far the most tenured coach in the league by, you know, over a decade. I have so much respect for them. It would not shock me to be wrong. I'm just kind of gambling on them being due for a down year and having a lack of continuity finally kind of catch up to them. Number 5, Wyoming. And they're a team that, like, if they were in the Mountain West title game, it would not surprise me at all. I'm a little bit hesitant to back them because I think Craig Bohl, like, losing a coach like him is like CSU losing Sonny Lubick. I truly believe he's in that rare air. They probably got the best front 7 in the conference, top to bottom, and some are Boise. They returned 4 starting offensive linemen. Harrison Whaley, outside of Genty, in my opinion, best back in the league. They're going to be able to run the ball. I want to see what it looks like offensively. Do they truly open it up? They were also plus 11 in turnovers last year and won a lot of tight games. A lot of the time, teams that are like that tends to regress a little bit. And there's a couple of teams here in the top 4 where you could make that same argument. If Bohl was back, I would have them top 3. I'm kind of in wait and see mode, but again, I would fully, it would not surprise me at all to see Wyoming in the Mountain West Championship game. And honestly, there's kind of a path to CSU and Wyoming playing for a Mountain West Championship, which would be epic. It's one of the cool things of not having divisions anymore. There's a world in where it could happen. At number 4, I'm going CSU. I think they have a chance to really surprise people this year, and I think the continuity within the team is one of the biggest factors. They have one of the most favorable schedules in the conference. Their Mountain West schedule, it's not even debatable. I'm banking on them winning games that they should win, teams that they are better than. We'll see what happens in September, but I'm really banking on this team playing meaningful games come November. Number 3, Fresno State, preseason all-conference quarterback in Mikey Keene and running back in Malik Sherrod. They missed Boise State, but do have to go on the road to Michigan, UNLV, Air Force, and UCLA. I almost dropped them below CSU here. I just think losing a coach like Tedford, you can't discount it, even as much as I love Tim Skipper and I'm rooting for him to have success, and I'm excited he's finally got his opportunity. I think this team probably has kind of a, you know, let's do this for our coach type mindset that can be good or bad. Sometimes it can be a little bit distracting. I'm giving them the respect because the talent is still there on paper. Fresno State and UNLV and Boise, I think if I'm saying CSU, Wyoming, and Hawaii are the top 3 candidates to exceed expectations, would kind of make sense that you could say that the teams I have in the top 3 of the power rankings are the top 3 candidates to potentially not meet the hype. Number 2, we got UNLV. Can Sluka keep the offensive momentum rolling? You do lose both guards. Tiger Shanks is a stud at right tackle, voted him all conference. They get Boise and Fresno at home, which is huge, not having to go into 2 of the tougher road atmospheres in the conference. Their top 3 leading tacklers are back defensively, which to me, that if you're going to believe in UNLV, I think it's less about the offense doing what it did a year ago and more about the fact that Barry Odom is a really physical style coach. They embrace that mentality. Their linebackers are awesome. Jackson Woodard is a stud. They've also got Cam Oliver back at corner, who led the league in interceptions. I mean, that's a really good team. I also just think it's fair to point out that much like CSU, I think there's some healthy skepticism when it comes to UNLV and being able to sustain it, because we've just frankly never seen it happen before. That doesn't mean it's impossible, but it just means we haven't seen it happen yet. Number one, we're going Boise State. They've got a wonky ass schedule. They open with 2 road games and they have 2 byes over their first 6 weeks before playing 6 straight to close. The Mountain West schedule is hard too. Like if you're fading Boise State, they have to go to UNLV, Hawaii, and Wyoming. Those are 3 of the tougher road trips you could make in Fort Collins this year. They play Oregon State and Washington State. They do play Oregon, like I mentioned. They're going to run the hell out of the ball with Ashton Gianti. I am interested to see, is it Malachi Nelson or do they go with Maddox Madsen? Is there a quarterback controversy? Is it a situation like it was with Avalos where we see both guys go back and forth? And I hate that stuff. It happened I didn't understand it last year. I know that Madsen was a more proficient passer, but Taylon Green, clearly a more dynamic athlete. And they were clearly better when he was there, in my opinion, just more dangerous. I could see a world in which they're really solid defensively. They run the ball, but maybe they don't have quite enough passing offense to keep up with some of the other teams in a shootout type scenario. Like, could you beat UNLV in a 40-37 type game? You could definitely beat them in a 20-17 game. Could you beat them in a shootout? Could you beat CSU in a shootout? I mean, it's going to be interesting to see kind of what this Boise identity ends up being under Spencer Danielson. He had a ton of energy at media days, I can tell you that. Dude was on the other side of the room and he was louder than the people I was interviewing 2 feet in front of me. The Boise fans are all in. We'll see. But I am going to give them the respect they deserve, especially considering, they had the preseason offensive and defensive player of the year. They have the best group of specialists in the conference as well. James Ferguson Reynolds, punter, is solid. Jonah Dalmas, one of the better kickers in all of college football. So there's a lot of reasons to believe that Boise is going to be right where they have become essentially perennial members, is the Mountain West Championship title game. It's become just like a yearly vacation that they anticipate. But God, it would be cool to see, a bronze boot championship. How fun would that be? Wyoming, CSU. Obviously, I just want CSU to be relevant, and I don't think the expectation should necessarily be Mountain West or bust, at least going in. But I do think there is a world in which this team gets it going. And if they're able to have some success, if they can steal 1 or 2 on the road, like if you could finally beat Air Force in the Springs for the first time since 2002, if you could steal 1 on the road against Fresno State, you're going to have to beat Nevada if you want to be in the mix. But if you could steal 1 against one of those teams that's been kind of at the top of the league these last couple of years, with how the schedule plays out in your favor with the home slate, you could see it. You could talk yourself into it. That's all I'm saying. That's all I've got for today. I appreciate everybody that's rocked with me all morning. Shout out to everybody in the Toyota chat. Hope everybody's having a blast this weekend. Enjoy NCAA 25. If you're like me and you don't game as much as you used to, remember you got to pace yourself. You're going to get Nintendo thumb or something like that. You can't binge the way that you did. You're not the same young buck that you once were. It's a hard situation. We all got to look in the mirror sometimes and have that realization. But I can't wait for football season, guys. I cannot wait to have something a little bit more substantial to dive into. We do have to get a little bit creative in the off season at times. But you guys have been great. You always tune in. You always support me. And it means the world to me. Much love, y'all. I'm always proud to be. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.